Hello and welcome back to Everon Railways. In this video I'm going to be talking about what's known as the House Dum Mesto 3. There are 23 House Dum Mesto 3s on Everon, or at least within the 18 towns on Everon. And it comes in at number 3, tied with the Culna, as being the most numerous building on Everon. Number 3. The Culna probably wins because there are more Culnas out in the countryside. I'm only giving a count for within the 18 towns on Everon. And the towns that have the most number of these, most notable would be 5 in Morton. And there's actually a double. One of these is double actually, and it's kind of connected in Morton there. 5 in Morton, 5 in Lamentin. Now, construction of this building is going to be very similar to what we saw in the Stadola build. There are only one side and one end cast at a time, which brings up the molds. The molds are smooth-ons, Mold Max 30, of course. And they are a one-piece mold. And the convenience and time that I saved in only making a one-piece mold, I lost in the construction phase. Because a one-piece mold open like this, you can get varying degrees of thicknesses of your walls. And what that means is when you do have varying degrees of thicknesses, is each corner will then have to be attention has to be made to each corner. In a lot of cases there may have to be sanding and filing. Now this is actually a nice match here. Got a little collision there. Collapse. And I have, here are some casting blanks of the Mesto 3. I can get these various sides that are cast. I've actually got two different types of resins here. This is a Smooth-On's Task Series resin, which is ultra strong in ultra thin pieces. And the other resin in here, the whiter resin, is Smooth Cast. That's probably 305. I've got several ends there, or several sides. Consider those sides, and some end pieces over here. Very similar to the Stadola. Okay, a little later in the video I'll be showing what roofing material I'm going to be using for this building, as well as there's 2 chimneys, and I have 2 gutters, which will later be assembled on the building. So what's next? The usual steps in painting the exposed area. Now that's going to entail painting these windows black, and this recessed door here area black, and just painting the under the eaves and the peak. So we'll do that and be back. I have finished painting the exposed areas, or the areas that will be exposed after the screenshot panels are applied. Went with a gray on the underside of the eaves, with a tan on the face of the peak. In the game you do have a tannish color on the these peak ends here. And originally I was concerned, and I didn't know how I was going to paint these windows and get them black. Here's an unpainted section. And what I originally tried is, at first I was thinking, how am I going to paint these very tiny little squares, and without getting the paint on the white windowsills and frames. And I tried to drop very tiny drops of black paint into those window panes, and that didn't work. It became messy, and that would mean each one had to be done perfectly. Well, it wasn't, and it couldn't be done that way. So what I ended up doing was I just went ahead and grab the brush here. Just went ahead and just painted everything black. The entire sills, made sure that the window panes were filled in with the black. And what black did I use? Actually, I used a combination. I used Tamiya, however you want to pronounce it, XF1 flat black. And I applied that over the window panes on every window. And then I came back with my finger and a lintless cloth, dipped it in some isopropyl alcohol, and 91% isopropyl alcohol, and then just rubbed off or rubbed over the window panes and the window sills. And what that did is it removed most of that black paint. And what I was left with is, and you can see I left one here, a gray window frame. Well, in the game they're not. I was going to leave it that way, but in the game they're not gray, they're white, so I needed to whiten them up somewhat in order for them to stand out the way they're supposed to in the game. So what I did is, after this step, and I was left with a gray window pane, what I did, and I left one this way so you could see it, is it came back in with a sanding block, a fine grain, and I just very lightly sanded the tops of that window pane. And these window panes are embossed, and they stick up, and they stick up higher than the black window panes. And I just very lightly sand the tops of the window panes, and that gives me brings back my white window panes and sills. Now, they're not perfect and they're not pristine, but nothing on any of these buildings on Everon is pristine, and they get toned down a little bit, and they get a little weathered look. But this actually turned out. I was surprised, and I was happy that this turned out the way it did, because it solves that problem. It was going to be a headache and a nightmare to figure out, or to actually have to go and do delicate, detailed paintings. And if I had to paint these white, that wouldn't have worked either, because that's, let's just say this is the best way to go about it, I think. Okay, what's next? What's next is I need to apply my screenshot panels to my ends, my other end, to my two ends, and then assemble the walls. I cannot apply, just as with the Stadola, I cannot apply the screenshot panels to the side walls, because just like in the Stadola, there is a 2mm extension here. So the screenshot panels have to go over. This has been glued together for that to overlap, because the screen panel is actually going to overlap 2mm to butt up and cover this corner here. So we'll get that done and be back. Okay guys, well I had a setback because for the life of me I cannot get these panels to match up correctly, and I've been working on this for a few hours now, and it's just to the point where the whole concept of having details on these models isn't going to work. And that might look okay in the video, but in reality it just doesn't look good. So that's a setback. So what I have two options. I can actually order prototypes with a smooth wall with no window details, or I could just take all the existing castings I have and run them on a belt sander and just very quickly remove these window details. In fact, a lot of this probably doesn't even have to come off because it's not very high, and if I use photo paper it's thick and you won't even really, you might catch a little bit of a bump on the model. So these sills on the upper window really stick out, so they would have to come down quite a bit. It wouldn't be hard to do this. In fact, it would be easier to do this and sand the detail, the windows off, the castings, than it would be to go through the process all over again. It's disheartening because I have a model in the pipeline that has a lot of details, and unfortunately it seems like that's just going to be covered over with a screenshot panel. The benefit to going this route of eliminating the window details is construction goes a lot faster, and the building, I mean, you can't get any more real than a screenshot of the entire wall, windows and all, taken from the game. So, but going into this, I wanted to use these details because I thought it would make the models pop, give it a little more pizzazz, make it look a little more realistic. But I knew that going in, that if this was not going to fit, if I couldn't get these panels to fit around these details properly, and I can't, like I said, I've been working on this for hours now, then there's no point in having it, because at that point the panels detract from the overall model. The point of the detail was to add to the realism of the model, not detract from it. And if it detracts, then there's no point in even using them. So back to the drawing board. This is going to take you won't know this because you'll see a completed video, but this is probably going to postpone this completion of this model for another week. I'm back, and I have sanded off all of the window details on the sides and ends. So this is going to be the route that I take, and it wasn't bad at all, really. I mean, these flat sides, these took less than a minute a piece to do on the belt sander. These took a little longer because there is manual hand sanding involved. For example, on the belt sander, it runs that way. You can only sand these lower windows and about half of these upper windows off. But I cannot get to these on the belt sander because of this roof line. And on a previous attempt, I actually nicked and reduced my roof planks there quite a bit, so those are set aside. So now I'm ready to, and this is only a day later, by the way. This is the following day, it didn't take very long to resize or rescale the new screenshots that have the windows on them. Here are the end pieces that need to go on next. That's our next step, minus window details, and construction will go a lot faster now. I have glued the walls and end pieces together using gel super glue, and I've applied the screenshot panels to the walls. Needless to say, it was much easier doing it this way. Still have to come back and put some tan paint on these peak ends. And I left, the one detail I did leave is that indentation where the door is. That door is separately cut, and it's about 2 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters sunk into the wall. I guess I like these windows. I mean, these are the accurate windows that came right out of the game, so you can't get any more accurate than that. So as far as the other details being real, this may be the only way to go, really. That those panels that I painted, the windows, I'm going to set those aside. I'll use those for something else, maybe Operation Flashpoint related, Everon related. But since I took the time to paint those windows, I'll turn that building into something. So the next thing is to get on with the roof. Assemble the roof, apply the roof. I've got the 2 chimneys that need to be applied, and a pair of gutters. Okay, the material I'm going to use for the roof are these Vollmer roof tile plastic sheets. Product number N7350. And these look like a perfect match for the tiles on for the tile roof buildings on Everon. It's obviously going to be, it's going to need some weathering to tone that down. So I'll go ahead and get the roof installed and be back. I have installed the roof, and while I was at it, I went ahead and added the 2 chimneys and the 2 gutters. I toned the plastic tile sheeting down. What I used with that, and I don't know if it's focusing or you can see it in this light, but what I used is Vallejo's black wash for dark vehicles, it says. And this works great as it gets down into the crevices and the areas around the shingles. And I would apply that with a brush and then come back in with a lintless cloth after it had already somewhat dried and just rub up and down and remove the wash from the surface of the tiles, but leaving it in the recesses. And what that does is it allows you to see the definition of the individual tiles. It leaves that black in those crevices. The 2 chimneys were installed. These 2 chimneys are actual 3D printed chimneys. These are not castings. I didn't go to the lengths of making molds of the chimneys. I may in the future. I might order some more and order some more chimneys. So this is the actual 3D printed piece. I made a quick little chimney template from the program, the Google program, where I designed this building, and I went in there and used the dimensions of the roof to make a template, and I just simply put it on one corner, and it gave me the proper dimensions and distance from the edge of the roof and from the roof crest. And I applied the gutters. The gutters are also 3D printed. The chimneys and the gutters were printed in Shapeways FUD, Frosted Ultra Detail. And the gutters were painted a dark green, Tamiya, dark green color, and applied with super glue. So what's left, the only thing left is to put the screenshot wraps panels around the chimneys to give them their patterns, and then just touch-up paint, like on the ends here. Touch this up with some tan paint, like in the game, on both ends, and I'll darken the chimney holes with some flat black paint, and that should wrap up the build. I finished putting the screenshot panels on the chimneys and painting the tops. I'm going to go ahead and call this building done. There's a couple exceptions to this completed building that I do not like. One of them is on this one chimney here on the right. There is a gap, a little bit of gap between the base of the chimney and the tile roof. I don't know if you can see that on the video. So I may go ahead and redo this chimney wrap and get it lower and get it flush as best I can to the bottom of the tile roof. One other thing I do not like is, if you can see here, there's that big crease between the tile roof panel and the resin roof angle there. And you can really see that gap there. So I think I'm going to go over that with some putty and fill that in and sand that down. There's a lot of things I can do. I could put a piece of stripped styrene on these roof ends, and that would cover it, and then just go ahead and paint them. And I don't like that at all. It's just too obvious. A couple of notes. When I was building this building, I noticed that when I was cutting the roof panels, I cut the roof panels nice and square, and when I put them on the roof, I found out that my building is not exactly square. And you don't notice it looking at the completed model, but the body is not actually perfectly square. So I put the squared roof panels on, and what happened was one side stuck out and actually was skewed, and it was thicker at one end and slowly tapered toward the peak. So what I did is trim that the best that I could, and it still wasn't perfect, so I went ahead and took the entire model and put it on 400 grit sandpaper and just rubbed that away and sanded down that peak. It came out nicely on that one end. So that may be something I do in the future on all the peaks, is sand them down till you don't even see the seam between the two layers. You can actually see the layer there too, which I do not like. And there was some discoloration on one of the gutters where the super glue was applied between the gutter and the roof. And there was some like white streaks. Well, to remedy that, I just took some of the Vallejo black wash and just applied it and left it on pretty thick in that area, and that took care of that discoloration and blended it all in. And the one corner I left the wash on pretty thick because it looks like there's maybe there's some drainage problems going on there. There's some rot occurring due to the gutter malfunction. But that concludes the House Dum Mesto 3. Thank you guys for watching Everon Railways.